Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere muddy, smoky, and, let's be honest, pretty gross. You're waking up in the Middle Ages and, let's just say, your chiropractor would be furious. There's no bed, no blanket, just a pile of straw. That smells vaguely of goat, and you're sharing it with something that might be a rat, or a large beetle with confidence issues. You've slept in your clothes. Everyone does. Because changing clothes daily is a luxury for people who own more than one tunic. And guess what? You don't. Your shirt is rough linen, stained with everything from soup to soot. And your feet, well, your feet haven't known softness since that one dream where you walked on clouds made of mashed turnips. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love hearing from the midnight historians out there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift your head, brush off a piece of hay that's trying to become one with your scalp, and hear the first signs of life. Chickens gossiping loudly outside, hooves clopping on the muddy street, and the unmistakable clanging of a blacksmith who seems far too chipper for this hour. Your nose twitches. The air smells of damp wood smoke, yesterday's stew, and the faint tang of something rotting. It's the village's signature scent. Oh, to everything mixed together. There's no Febreze coming to save you here. You push open the wooden door. Well, it's more of a warped plank, and step out into the muddy lane. No sidewalks, no pavement, just slippery dirt with the occasional gift left behind by someone's cow, pig, or very confused goose. The mud squelches around your ankles. That's right. Shoes optional, trench foot probable. The houses lean like sleepy drunks. Wattle and daub walls, which are basically just sticks smeared with mud and hope, creak as if whispering, "We weren't built for longevity." Roofs are thatched and occasionally home to entire colonies of birds. If you're lucky, your roof doesn't leak. If you're really lucky, it leaks somewhere other than directly onto your sleeping straw. You shuffle down the lane, and your stomach groans. Not in a poetic, "Oh, how I hunger" way, but more like a rusty door hinge in distress. Breakfast is not a meal you anticipate with joy. It's likely porridge. Again, always porridge. Maybe with a turnip chunk if you're living large. You head toward the communal cooking pot, which hasn't been fully scrubbed in. Well, never. As you pass your neighbor, you exchange sleepy nods. No cheery, "Good morning," just mutual survival acknowledgement. You both know what's coming. Another day of toil, possibly some blistering, and if you're lucky, a piece of dried fish that's only slightly crunchy with beetle husk. At the village center, the Lord's tax collector is already setting up. The man is wearing a cloak so stiff with grime it could stand on its own. He's inspecting scrolls, checking names, and giving everyone the kind of look that says, "Yes, I will take your last chicken," and "No, I don't feel bad about it." Nearby, a monk is ringing a small bell and muttering prayers. The church, made of cold stone and colder morals, looms over the village. Religion isn't a Sunday activity. It's your entire schedule. The church tells you when to plant, when to fast, and when to panic about eternal damnation. Oh, and your chores? They're unrelenting. There's firewood to chop, water to haul, from a well that may or may not be a public health hazard, and animals to feed before you've even had your first spoonful of warm oat paste. There's no breakfast table, no family circle sharing what we dreamed about, no phone to scroll through, just the smell of boiled grain, the sound of a rooster who thinks 4 a.m. is a great time to perform, and the soft squish of something unidentifiable between your toes. You might pause at the town's notice board. It's a slab of wood with parchment nailed to it, covered in announcements about upcoming tithes, missing sheep, or new laws about when you can and can't bake bread. Some of them are written in Latin, which you can't read, but it doesn't matter. The message is always the same: obey, pay up, and keep your head down. Now you may be wondering, how did anyone survive this? They didn't, not most of the time. Childhood mortality was sky high. If you made it past age 5, congratulations. You now have a good shot at maybe 40, if the pox, dysentery, or famine doesn't get you first. Yay? But still, there's something oddly soothing about the simplicity. No meetings, no emails, no endless notifications. Just the rhythm of day and night, work and sleep, planting and harvest. You live by the sun and rest with the stars, provided the rats let you. You glance at the sky. It's cloudy, like always. Blue skies are a rumor, the kind of thing bards sing about when they run out of tales involving dragons and overly noble knights. And as you ladle your porridge into a slightly cracked wooden bowl and sit on a stump that might also be a communal toilet in disguise, you think to yourself, how in the world did they manage? The answer is poorly but persistently. And that's only the morning. Ready to find out what happens after this delightful breakfast? Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere muddy, smoky, and, let's be honest, pretty gross. You're waking up in the Middle Ages and, let's just say, your chiropractor would be furious. There's no bed, no blanket, just a pile of straw. That smells vaguely of goat, and you're sharing it with something that might be a rat or a large beetle with confidence issues. You've slept in your clothes. Everyone does. Because changing clothes daily is a luxury for people who own more than one tunic. And guess what? You don't. Your shirt is rough linen, stained with everything from soup to soot. And your feet? Well, your feet haven't known softness since that one dream where you walked on clouds made of mashed turnips. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love hearing from the midnight historians out there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift your head, brush off a piece of hay that's trying to become one with your scalp, and hear the first signs of life. Chickens gossiping loudly outside, hooves clopping on the muddy street, and the unmistakable clanging of a blacksmith who seems far too chipper for this hour. Your nose twitches. The air smells of damp wood smoke, yesterday's stew, and the faint tang of something rotting. It's the village's signature scent. Ode to everything mixed together. There's no Febreze coming to save you here. You push open the wooden door. Well, it's more of a warped plank, and step out into the muddy lane. No sidewalks, no pavement, just slippery dirt with the occasional gift left behind by someone's cow, pig, or very confused goose. The mud squelches around your ankles. That's right. Shoes optional, trench foot probable. The houses lean like sleepy drunks. Wattle and daub walls, which are basically just sticks smeared with mud and hope, creak as if whispering, "We weren't built for longevity." Roofs are thatched and occasionally home to entire colonies of birds. If you're lucky, your roof doesn't leak. If you're really lucky, it leaks somewhere other than directly onto your sleeping straw. You shuffle down the lane, and your stomach groans. Not in a poetic, "Oh, how I hunger" way, but more like a rusty door hinge in distress. Breakfast is not a meal you anticipate with joy. It's likely porridge. Again, always porridge. Maybe with a turnip chunk if you're living large. You head toward the communal cooking pot, which hasn't been fully scrubbed in. Well, never. As you pass your neighbor, you exchange sleepy nods. No cheery, "Good morning," just mutual survival acknowledgement. You both know what's coming. Another day of toil, possibly some blistering. And if you're lucky, a piece of dried fish that's only slightly crunchy with beetle husk. At the village center, the Lord's tax collector is already setting up. The man is wearing a cloak so stiff with grime it could stand on its own. He's inspecting scrolls, checking names, and giving everyone the kind of look that says, "Yes, I will take your last chicken," and "No, I don't feel bad about it." Nearby, a monk is ringing a small bell and muttering prayers. The church, made of cold stone and colder morals, looms over the village. Religion isn't a Sunday activity. It's your entire schedule. The church tells you when to plant, when to fast, and when to panic about eternal damnation. Oh, and your chores? They're unrelenting. There's firewood to chop, water to haul, from a well that may or may not be a public health hazard, and animals to feed before you've even had your first spoonful of warm oat paste. There's no breakfast table, no family circle sharing what we dreamed about, no phone to scroll through. Just the smell of boiled grain, the sound of a rooster who thinks 4 a.m. is a great time to perform, and the soft squish of something unidentifiable between your toes. You might pause at the town's notice board. It's a slab of wood with parchment nailed to it, covered in announcements about upcoming tithes, missing sheep, or new laws about when you can and can't bake bread. Some of them are written in Latin, which you can't read, but it doesn't matter. The message is always the same: obey, pay up, and keep your head down. Now you may be wondering, how did anyone survive this? They didn't, not most of the time. Childhood mortality was sky high. If you made it past age 5, congratulations. You now have a good shot at maybe 40, if the pox, dysentery, or famine doesn't get you first. Yay? But still, there's something oddly soothing about the simplicity. No meetings, no emails, no endless notifications. Just the rhythm of day and night, work and sleep, planting and harvest. You live by the sun and rest with the stars, provided the rats let you. You glance at the sky. It's cloudy, like always. Blue skies are a rumor, the kind of thing bards sing about when they run out of tales involving dragons and overly noble knights. And as you ladle your porridge into a slightly cracked wooden bowl and sit on a stump that might also be a communal toilet in disguise, you think to yourself, how in the world did they manage? The answer is poorly but persistently. And that's only the morning. Ready to find out what happens after this delightful breakfast? You wake before dawn, not because you're well rested, but because the rooster is apparently on a power trip. He crows like he's auditioning for a medieval rock band and refuses to stop. The air is damp and smells like old wood smoke, wet wool, and vague disappointment. You stretch, only to immediately regret it. Your back cracks like you're made of dry twigs, and your legs feel like someone replaced your bones with turnips. Harold the rat is nowhere to be seen this morning. You hope he found a better corner, or, if he was feeling ambitious, a career in the monastery's pantry. Breakfast? It's bread again. Stale, naturally. You soften it in what little broth is left from last night's stew and try not to think about how it tastes like regret soaked in dishwater. You gnaw it down anyway, because hunger is a powerful motivator, and because brunch hasn't been invented yet. Today's task isn't fencing. No, today you've been roped into helping with laundry. But not the kind you're used to, with pleasant lavender detergent and TikToks playing in the background. This is the medieval kind. Wooden tubs, lye soap that smells like burned despair, and a river so cold it could probably grant you immortality if it didn't also give you pneumonia. You drag linen and wool garments, stiff with dirt and sweat, down to the stream. There's a rhythm to this, oddly soothing in its misery. You slap wet tunics against flat rocks, watching flecks of mud fly. You scrub until your fingers go numb, then switch hands and keep going. A woman nearby hums a tune, something soft and lilting. You hum too, mostly to distract yourself from the fact that someone just walked upstream to relieve themselves. Laundry, it turns out, was more than a chore. It was a social hub. Here's where people traded gossip, news, and occasional insults disguised as friendly comments. "Oh, is that still the dress your daughter wore to midsummer?" one woman says sweetly, while wringing out a cloak with alarming force. You learn that Thomas the Cooper has a new cat. The miller's youngest eloped with someone suspiciously good-looking, and the blacksmith's apprentice may have accidentally melted part of the church bell. Again, as you rinse a particularly stained tunic that probably belonged to someone with a heroic distrust of bathtubs, you hear someone mention the plague widow. Apparently, she's been spotted again. Wearing black, walking by the edge of the forest, speaking to no one. You shiver, but it could be the water. Katsu gia van kontran luan vevieklu goa fudish ben la. Mot ngoi ko that hai chila noi so tap the. You finish the washing, hands raw and red, and haul the dripping clothes back up the hill. They'll be hung on wooden racks to dry, or just draped over bushes if you're feeling rebellious. The air smells cleaner here despite the manure, like something ancient and green. You take a breath. It's almost nice. Back in the village square, things are livelier. A traveling peddler has arrived, his cart overflowing with fabrics, trinkets, and dubious elixirs that look like something you'd find in the back of your fridge. Children gather, wide-eyed, while adults inspect goods and mutter about prices. You spot a bottle labeled "for strong nerves." You wonder if it's just river water and wishful thinking. Still, it's a rare kind of excitement, news from other villages, maybe even whispers from distant cities. You overhear that a noble's castle nearby recently burned down because someone left a candle unattended near the curtains. Very medieval, very relatable. Lunchtime comes, and with it, pottage. Again. This one's thicker thanks to barley, and contains a mysterious lump that might be meat or an overly determined root vegetable. You eat it anyway, sitting on a log and letting the sun warm your shoulders. A man sits beside you and starts talking about saints. Not the official kind, but the odd, local ones, like Saint Drustin, patron of lost shoes, or Saint Elgiva, who supposedly turned water into moderately better water. You nod politely as he recounts how one woman swears her goat was healed after sneezing 3 times in the saint's chapel. You don't question it. Medieval spirituality was flexible. By mid-afternoon, it's time to collect firewood. This means venturing to the forest edge, a place that feels more enchanted than eerie. Trees creak in the breeze, birds call out from high branches, and the ground is soft with moss. But you don't stray far. There are stories, after all, of lights dancing among the trees, of voices calling your name when no one's there. As you gather sticks and bundle them together, you pause. The quiet is thick here. Time slows. You hear the wind in the leaves, the snap of a twig underfoot, your own breath. It's peaceful in a way that no screen or app can replicate, and just a little terrifying. You return to the village, arms full, face flushed, and are greeted with nods of quiet approval. You're still the outsider, but you're learning. Slowly, clumsily. As the day fades again into dusk, the villagers gather near the hearth in the central hall. Stories are shared, songs are sung, badly but enthusiastically. A man plays a flute with only 2 good notes. A woman starts a tale about a knight who turned into a goose, and no one blinks. You sit, there, cross-legged, a little warmer now, a little less sore. Someone hands you a mug of something that tastes like spicy hay and claims it helps you sleep. It probably just numbs the tongue. You lie down later that night, next to the fire, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke and centuries. You can still hear the flute, faint, warbling, like a lullaby with only 3 notes but a whole lot of heart. Your last thought before sleep? Maybe, just maybe, you're getting the hang of this century. you wake to the sound of church bells. Again. They toll not just to mark the hour, but to remind everyone who's boss. Time, and a particularly enthusiastic monk named Brother Aldred who seems to take far too much pleasure in ringing them. This morning, your arms feel like soggy loaves of bread from yesterday's firewood mission, and your fingers still have that delightful, scrubbed with lie and shame texture. You sit up slowly, trying not to knock over the person still snoring next to you, and you're hit by the now familiar perfume of sweat, smoke, and community body heat. But there's no time for lounging. Today's a market day. You shuffle out into the early light, where villagers are already laying out their wares on wooden stalls and fabric-covered carts. Chickens dart between legs like feathered anarchists, and someone's already arguing loudly about the price of leeks. You, naturally, are sent to help load crates of dried fish onto a cart. The smell is assertive, like if low tide got stuck in your nose and refused to leave. Still, you lift and stack, catching fragments of conversation. Apparently, there's a traveling priest in town claiming he has a bone fragment from St. Cuthbert's elbow. It supposedly glows in the moonlight and cures foot ailments. Kachasu giavan kontran luan veviek liu, nhung man suong than ila that he chila kachkiem, tien kon ungoan kuan hatho. The market pulses with noise, scent, and texture. Rough spun linen, brass, trinkets, wheels of cheese large enough to use as footstools. You see a child staring, open-mouthed, at a jar filled with pickled eels. Honestly, same. A man in a cloak is selling fire in a bottle, just a little sulfur, oil, and some deeply questionable marketing. Another offers charms against evil spirits, shaped like tiny pigs. You're tempted. Pigs seem to understand survival. You're told to deliver a message to the town scribe, which means finding your way to the one building that doesn't smell like livestock. A modest stone house near the church. Inside it smells like parchment and ink. A welcome break. The scribe, a man with one good eye and 10 good opinions, reads your message aloud as if auditioning for a play, then waves you off while muttering about someone misquoting Aristotle. Again. On the way back, you pause by the town stocks. A young man sits there, face flushed, holding a cabbage like it betrayed him personally. You ask what he did. "Stole a pie," he mutters. "A bad one, too." You offer him a piece of your bread out of pity or solidarity. He nods solemnly. Pie theft is a serious but understandable crime. You swing back through the market just in time to witness a mystery. Someone's goat has vanished. Just poof. No tracks, no sound. Just one frayed rope and a deeply confused farmer. Rumors start. Instantly. Witches, forest spirits, a very determined wolf with a ladder. Someone swears they saw a woman in blue chanting near the well at dawn. As usual, there's no evidence, but there is a growing queue at the charm seller's stall. Later in the day, you're asked to help the baker. He's a gruff man with flour in every crease of his skin, but he bakes like a poet writes. Chaotic, but somehow magical. You knead dough until your wrists ache, shaping loaves and rolls, and yes, there are rats in the flour sacks. But it's fine. You make peace with the fact that medieval bread is probably 2% rodent by weight. Extra protein. While the oven roars, he tells you how his grandmother once saw St. Dunstan punch the devil in the nose. You nod seriously, as one must. The devil had it coming. Evening comes, and the sky dims into a bruised purple. You're invited to a modest supper with 3 families who share a long wooden table and one collective sense of humor. The meal is a thin onion soup, but the company is rich. One woman makes you laugh so hard mid-sip that you nearly inhale a slice of turnip. Worth it. Stories are swapped like currency. You tell one about a faraway land with glowing boxes that show moving pictures. They call you a jester and beg for more. Someone produces a stringed instrument with 2 intact strings, and begins to pluck a song that sounds vaguely familiar, like the memory of a tune you once heard in a dream. The fire crackles. A child falls asleep in a corner, face smeared with ash and joy. Before bed, the healer stops by with a jar of paste she says is for dreams. It smells like mint, earth, and something that might be snail. She rubs a dab on your temples. You don't protest. You're tired, and at this point, snail dreams sound better than muscle cramps. You curl up on your straw mattress, body sore, stomach humming gently from the soup, and think about how the day began with bells and ended with music. You'd like to say you're getting used to it, but then the goat screams from the roof. You sit up so fast your head spins, the straw beneath you crinkling like dry thunder. The screaming goat is not, as you might have hoped, a very specific dream or a child practicing falsetto. No, it is, very much, a goat. On the roof. The healer, next to you, mutters something that sounds like blasted spirits again, grabs a broom, and marches outside as if this sort of thing happens every other Tuesday. You hesitate, then follow, because curiosity, unlike goats, does not wait until morning. Outside, a small crowd has gathered, still in their night tunics, gaping upward like they're waiting for the goat to deliver a sermon. Sure enough, there it is, perched on the thatch, bleeding like it's offended by the roof's pitch. No one knows how it got up there. Someone suggests divine intervention. Someone else suggests it's the same goat that vanished earlier. A third person just wants to go back to sleep. The baker arrives, still dusted in flour from last night's work, and squints at the rooftop. That's Edith's goat, he says, the one that disappears every market day. You glance at Edith, who blushes suspiciously and mutters something about wandering spirits. The goat takes a step and very nearly topples a chimney pot, prompting a collective gasp. Eventually, two lads climb up with rope and cabbage as bait. The goat, being a goat, eats the cabbage and then trots down without help, looking deeply pleased with itself. The crowd disperses with that half-embarrassed chuckle of people who'll absolutely pretend this didn't happen. You lie back down, but sleep is slow to return. Your mind won't stop replaying the day. The market buzz, the bread making, the scribe with his dramatic flair. Even the silliest things feel vivid here, like you're watching them through glass polished by time. By morning, the goat incident is already legend. Flies now, it does, someone says over breakfast, chewing on a barley biscuit with all the enthusiasm of a person eating gravel. Levitated, I swear. You're tasked with helping the washerwomen by the stream, which sounds peaceful until you realize helping means hauling buckets and stomping clothes with your bare feet in water that could chill soup. The soap stings a bit, made from ash and animal fat. Cleans like the devil, one of the women says proudly. Smells like him too, another mutters. There's laughter, though. You hear about a knight who tried to ride a pig into battle during a drunken dare. It squealed heroically, someone assures you. And while no one really remembers his name, the pig is commemorated in song. You hum the first line as you wring out a tunic. As you walk back to the village square, you pass a group of children practicing archery with sticks and alarming aim. One girl hits a chicken coop. The chickens express their disapproval loudly. You're sent to fetch honey from the monastery, which is both an errand and a test of your ability to stay respectful, while monks describe their bees like royal pets. Brother Lucius, the apiarist, introduces you to Queen Rowena III. You nod gravely. She's a very regal bee. The monastery gardens are oddly calming. Walled in stone, filled with herbs you recognize mostly from soups and vaguely magical ointments. The scent of rosemary and sage sticks to your cloak as you walk back. And you wonder if medieval dry cleaning is a thing. Spoiler, it's not. You return just in time for a strange procession. A man with a painted wooden mask and jingling bells. marches through town, banging a drum and shouting rhymes to ward off miasmas. He claims bad smells cause bad health. Honestly, you'd believe him after the fish cart yesterday. The villagers toss herbs at him like confetti, and someone offers him ale. He drinks it through the mask. You decide not to ask how. Later, you find a quiet spot by the well where an old woman is telling stories to 3 wide-eyed children and 1 equally rapt goose. She speaks of a tower that once stood beyond the forest, built by a king who feared the stars falling. He thought he could catch them, she says, but stars don't like cages. One of the kids whispers, like goats. As dusk returns, you're invited to a home with a chimney that smells like apples and old books. A minor nobleman, retired, with too many rings and not enough teeth, wants someone to listen to his tales. You're it. He offers a drink made from warm milk, honey, and something spiced that numbs your tongue slightly. Victorian bedtime drink prototype, you joke to yourself. He doesn't get it. He tells you of his youth, tournaments, a duel, over a particularly smug swan. A woman who once tried to marry into nobility by pretending to be a long-lost cousin of Charlemagne. Turned out she was from Bristol, he sighs. But oh, what a dinner party. By the time you leave, night has swallowed the village whole. Candles flicker behind shutters. Somewhere, a lute hums faintly through thin walls. You walk past the well again. No sign of goats or stars, but the wind does feel like it's holding secrets. Back in your shared bed space, someone snores. Another mutters in their sleep about eel taxes. You wrap your cloak tighter around yourself and rest your head against your makeshift pillow. You think maybe, just maybe, you could survive another day, as long as the goat stays off the roof. Morning arrives with the most medieval of alarm clocks. Church bells and a rooster locked in what can only be described as a screaming contest with itself. You blink awake on your straw mat, stiff from yesterday's bucket hauling and goat-related. Adrenaline. The cloaked figure next to you, someone's uncle probably, grunts, rolls over and continues dreaming about cheese, from the look on his face. Today, you're conscripted for fence duty, which sounds mild until you realize it means trudging through mud to repair barriers made of sticks and increasingly passive-aggressive thorns. You jab your finger on a particularly judgmental one and mutter something deeply modern. The man beside you chuckles and says, "That one gets everyone." The fence separates the village from the common lands, shared grazing fields and mysterious patches where people swear they've seen will-o'-the-wisps. You're not sure about ghostly lights, but you are pretty sure someone's lost a sock out here. A red one, flapping forlornly on a branch like a medieval surrender flag. Nearby, a group of shepherd boys are playing something like football, except with a pig's bladder, 1 mitten, and rules that seem to change mid-kick. You pause to watch, only to narrowly avoid being drafted as the new goalpost. Later, back in the village, there's a commotion around the blacksmith's shop. A new tool has been invented, or at least slightly improved. It's a hoe, but angled, he declares proudly, holding up a bent piece of iron like it's the Ark of the Covenant. Someone gasps. Someone else asks if it could also mash turnips. You try not to laugh, but then the talk shifts. You catch whispers. A knight is passing through. And not just any knight, Sir Reginald the Rattled, famous for his complicated legacy. Depending on who you ask, he once defeated 3 bandits, fell off a horse mid-duel, or accidentally proposed to a goose. The goose said yes, someone insists. You wander toward the town entrance just in time to see him arrive. Armor clinking, cloak dramatically muddy, a visor too tight for his face. He's followed by a young squire carrying both his sword and a fresh pie. Priorities. The villagers line up, partly out of reverence, mostly out of nosiness. Sir Reginald speaks. His voice is noble, if slightly nasally. "I seek lodging, mutton, and someone who knows where the nearest castle is." A boy points vaguely northeast. The knight nods solemnly. Then I shall go forth. After a nap, he dismounts with less grace than his squire's pie deserves, and is quickly ushered into the tavern, where he will surely exaggerate something by dinner. You, however, are roped into helping with haystacking, another romantic slice of medieval life no period drama ever mentions. The hay prickles through your tunic, and you sneeze so hard you spook a cat off a windowsill. Good omen, says an old woman who may be joking. You can't quite tell. As the sun lowers, the town square fills with sounds. Merchants hawking, children shrieking, someone trying to tune a harp with alarming results. The baker from earlier hands you a pastry with something purple in it. Berry? Beet? Unclear, he shrugs. You take a bite. Definitely both. Your teeth will be stained until winter. You slip away to the edge of the village and find a woman, painting strange symbols on stones. Wards, she says. Keep nightmares away. She hands you one shaped vaguely like a fish. You thank her. It smells faintly of vinegar and hope. Nearby, an old man sits carving tiny animals out of wood. One resembles a horse. Another looks suspiciously like the screaming goat. You buy it for 1 copper, which may be a terrible deal, but feels somehow worth it. Night comes quickly here, wrapped in wood smoke and soft laughter. You find yourself by the fire with a few others, listening to tales about the forest. One story says it holds a tree that sings in storms. Another insists a hidden spring there cures hiccups and heartbreak. You wonder if that's the same place. They send lovesick poets. A teen near the edge of the circle begins reciting something he clearly just made up. It's about a hedgehog who leads a rebellion. The others cheer. Write that down, someone says, which is hilarious because barely anyone here can write. As the fire burns lower, you notice the stars again. They're unnervingly bright. You think about what the old woman said, the tower that tried to catch them. Maybe she wasn't just spinning yarns, or maybe you're just really tired. You walk slowly back toward your sleeping space, pausing to touch the fish-shaped ward in your pocket. The village feels quieter tonight, like it's holding its breath. You pass a shutter with candlelight flickering behind it, and hear someone humming a lullaby with no words. You reach the straw pile, lie down carefully to avoid the pokey bit, and let your eyes drift closed. Somewhere in the distance, the goat bleats. You sigh. Of course it does. You wake up as the morning light seeps through the small window, illuminating the modest room. The scent of wood smoke and toasted bread lingers in the air, signaling the beginning of a new day. Outside, the crowing of roosters echoes through the village, blending with the distant chime of the church bells. Today is the village festival, a rare occasion for the whole community to gather and share joy after long days of hard work. In the square, villagers are crowding together. Children run and play with wooden hoops and balls made of goatskin. Adults are busy preparing the stalls. Bread, cheese, apple cider, and traditional dishes are laid out invitingly. A group of traveling performers entertains the crowd in the center of the square with acts of juggling, puppetry, and music. The sound of lutes and bamboo flutes fills the air, adding to the festive atmosphere. You're swept up by the rhythm, feeling the joy spreading all around. In the afternoon, an archery contest is held at the edge of the village. Archers, both young and old, take turns showing their skill, cheered on by the enthusiastic audience. You try your hand with an old bow borrowed from the blacksmith, and though your arrow only grazes the edge of the target, you still receive a warm round of applause. As the sun sets, villagers gather around a large bonfire in the center of the square. Together they sing folk songs, tell fairy tales, and share memories. The flickering flames light up their joyful faces, reflecting a sense of simple happiness. You sit beside an old carpenter, listening to him recount tales of past festivals, of traditions and customs slowly fading away. In that moment, you feel a deep connection. between people and community, between the past and the present. As night falls, you return to your small home, your heart full of emotion. The echoes of the festival still linger in your mind, like a gentle melody lulling you into peaceful sleep. You wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of dogs barking in the distance. Outside, a thin mist covers the village like a silver veil. Moonlight streams through the window, casting a shimmering glow on the floor, as if someone had sprinkled pearl dust across the ground. You put on a thick wool sweater and quietly step outside. The cold air numbs your nose, but the village at night holds a strange kind of beauty. The blacksmith's house is dark, the forge cold and still like a slumbering beast. The windmill at the edge of the village turns slowly in the night breeze, creaking softly like an ancient lullaby. You follow a narrow path leading to the village cemetery, where moss-covered headstones stand among wildflowers. In the pale moonlight, you see a small group gathered around a fresh grave. There is no weeping, only the soft murmur of a hymn blending with the sounds of nighttime insects. A man stands at the center of the group, the village priest, dressed in a dark cloak, a silver cross glinting in his hand. He speaks in a calm, steady voice, offering final words for the departed. An old woman who had lived alone, known for giving honey cakes to children during festivals. The villagers called her the grandmother of the apple tree. You stand quietly on the edge, listening to the story of her life. No grand victories or miracles, just a quiet existence of planting trees, baking bread, and listening. A small life, yet deeply cherished, for she had lived as a part of this place. As the ceremony ends, the villagers silently disperse, leaving behind sprigs of herbs and a small basket of gingerbread. You bow your head before the grave, feeling a strange peace rising from the earth. In a world of knights, kings, and battles, perhaps it is people like her who keep the simple life from fading away. You return in silence, your heart as light as the mist. The rustle of grass and the distant call of an owl seem to whisper a wordless story to you, that in the darkness of night, it is sometimes the warmest memories that burn the brightest. Troi vua chom sang. Ban he tieng ga gai jau jon guai sa. Roi jen tieng ban se gong hien tren juang jat am. Mot mui nong he kwa koi kui va ko ko sok vao mui ban. Vua de chiu. Vua ju hien ban hat hoi. Ban keo chan kao hon mo chut. Nhung roi to mo kien ban goi de. Hen hin rang guai. Mot pien cho jang hin. Tan hangai giwa kwang truong lang. Nhung chiek se chat. Jai rom. Tung sua. Vagio rao jang luk tuk keo jen. Ngoi muan ngoi ban goin hao bang gyong vuang gai ngu vua hoi ha. Ban kwet jin ranguai xem cho biet. Vi ai lai muon bo lo thugan hat voi sio thi thoi trong ko ko chu. Ban ji gyuan hong gian hang dung bang hung go jon sova vai bat mau jat. Mot ba gya rao ban nam rong voi gyong lan lan. Ke ben la mot ngoi jan ong trong bei kak loai dai thong. Nhu the chung la thu thoi trang moin hat. Trikon chai kwa chan ban. Tai kam kwa tau pumat va ban nhan thau kwa. Trong chung, nhun hong chiek jen, long be xiu chai bang juong. Ban dung lai truak mot gan hang ban, ruong gu. Mot loai fa che thoi trong. Ko tu thau mot nhu hoa bia, hoa o ai huong, ba joy. Kila chut nhua kaimo. Ngoi ban, mot pu nu tok ben than he bim dai. Moi ban nem thu bang mot chiek kok jat nho. Vi ruon gotten he, ko chut ke am troi kwa ko hong. Kin ban thai mi mat nang hon chi trong vai put. Ban koi them, jung la jo wong ko de dong the goi yom. Ko angwai jang ke chuyen o mot gok cho. Mot gan hat rong joy mulen hint non, tai kam jan luit. Anta vua shuai nhak. Vua keve mot ong vua angu quen suot muagat. Vadan chung thi kuyet jin kong jan thuk ong. Vi chang ai muon bijio kien ki jang vui choi. Ban jung ang he, mot luk, roi chot han ra mot jio thu vi. Hung kao chuyen buon quoin hat thoi jo thuong mang iten hiu suthat. Kak su giavan kontrang luan veviek liu, hung fien chon huda. Nai ko that sula noe tu tap thuong main hiem tuk. Hai chila kai ko jedan lang tam chuyen va trao joy bi kwet no mon supengon hon hang shom. Nhung du li do lagi. Chung van la noi nhung mau join hok siu ketan, mot tam tam jai mau sak. Hoi moch, hoi din hmat. Nhung kong theroi mat. Ban mua mot kai ban lam tu ngu koker. Len men. Dan lang goi la, ban bui thaon guyen. Va thuk su. Trong no giong hu juok taura. Tu ba fan ko ho va mot fan fap mau. Nhung ban anhet. Hong fai vin gon, ma vi. No, Va ojai. Kai luon thang. Mat troi len kao hon mot shoot. Tan kwa cho gyo tronen song jong. Nhang kong hoi ha. Ban ngoi suong ben got kai soi gyua kwang truong. Chia se chon goi voi mot kon meo beo maok sham tro. Jang nhin ben voi an. Mat kio, jaila kai kwa toi jay. Jung cho mo tuong. Ban dua long vao than kai. Mat ke kep lai trong an sang vang hat. Tren jau, la soi shao xaken he. Nhu the jang thi tham mot. Bai hat rudan rieng choban. Kela mat jen tu tuong lai. Nhung lai tim juok suyen bin trong mot fien cho kukiva. Mot kok ruulam tugiak angu. You wake up as the sun has already shifted past the peak of the stone church's roof. The gray cat has vanished, leaving only faint paw prints on the dusty ground and a few stray hairs clinging to your sleeve. No one disturbs you. Medieval. Folk seem to have a certain respect for those who doze off in the middle of the market. You rise, brush off your clothes, and begin strolling down the uneven cobbled path leading toward the small monastery nestled on the hillside. From afar, the bells chime slowly, as if even time itself has grown lazy after lunch. As you near the monastery gate, a young monk in a brown robe appears, arms wrapped around a large stack of books tied with leather cords. He bows his head in greeting, then silently continues on his way, leaving behind a faint scent of pine resin and old paper carried by the wind. You enter the inner courtyard, where a few monks are drying parchment under the sun in preparation for writing a new manuscript. You can't help but be drawn to the scriptorium, the room where light from narrow windows falls directly onto the writing desks. An elderly monk sits hunched over, holding a quill dipped in brown ink, shaping each letter as if speaking directly with God. Every line is touched with gold. Every illuminated initial is like a miniature garden, where vines and flowers curl around the letters. And you learn something. The Middle Ages may not have understood productivity as we do, but they certainly knew how to make each moment eternal. A single page could take a week to complete, and when it was finished, it was cherished like a treasure. Not for the content, but for the act of creation itself. Historians still debate whether these manuscripts were made purely for worship, or perhaps also as a way for monks to escape the dullness of farm labor. But whatever the reason, those pages are now priceless windows into the past. You're invited to sit on a long oak bench beside another monk who is grinding dried lavender with honey to make purple ink. He tells you that once, a monk dozed off while illustrating and accidentally drew a cat playing a lute into a liturgical book. Instead of removing it, the whole monastery agreed to color it in. Now everyone calls that manuscript the Gospel. Of the cat, you laugh, and so does he. A small, gentle laugh, ringing out like a spoon tapping a hollow ceramic cup. Then he turns back to his stone mortar and continues his work, as if the conversation had never happened. Everything here moves that way, quietly, patiently, and fleetingly, like incense smoke. Before you leave, you're handed a small piece, of parchment, hand-painted with a simple Latin phrase framed in red and blue floral designs. You don't understand its meaning right away, but you sense it's a kind blessing. You slip it into your inner pocket, where the scent of your morning, sleep wine still lingers. By the time you leave the monastery, the afternoon light is stretching long across the path back to the village. The market has disappeared, leaving behind only a few scattered straws and the deep ruts of wagon wheels in the dirt. You walk slowly, feeling the gravel crunch beneath your feet and the cool breeze slide up your sleeves. Something about this place makes you move slower, breathe deeper, and hear the beating of your heart more clearly. Not out of emotion, but because here, even your heart must walk. You thought that after the monastery and the morning market, all surprises had passed. But no, just as the afternoon light began to tint violet, a sound from afar made you stop. The deep, steady beat of drums, followed by the sharp blare of brass horns. You turned down a narrow, cobbled alley, and there it was. Welcome to the Harvest Traveling Fair. Medieval folks may not have known TikTok, but they certainly knew how to grab attention. In an open grassy field at the village's edge, troops of performers, storytellers, wandering alchemists, and gold-toothed healers gathered into a ring of color and sound. Bright flags hung from ropes, fluttering like living illustrations from a manuscript. A tall, thin man in indigo robes, his hair loose and his face painted white, balanced on a wooden sphere while spinning 8 spoons as if they had minds of their own. Children clapped wildly, while a middle-aged lady pursed her lips in deep skepticism. You could see the judgment in her eyes from 3.5 meters away. You pushed deeper into the crowd. A small table had been set up using 2 wooden barrels and an old door covered with crimson velvet. Behind it, a young woman displayed vials of mysterious potions, deep blue, lilac purple, and even one bubbling in jade green. For dreams and dullness, she said, as though those were contagious illnesses. Historians still debate whether these traveling fair medicines were placebos, true magic, or simply the result of eating too many wild mushrooms. But one thing is certain. No one left the fair empty-handed, whether it be a feather, a light-hearted curse, or merely the lingering scent of wood smoke on their sleeves. You sat on a straw mat where a folk band played a ballad about a knight, stung on the butt by bees while rescuing a princess from a well. No one asked why the princess was in the well. Neither did you. You were too busy eating a honeyfish cake, a soft golden pastry with a crisp crust and a cinnamon filling gentle as a grandmother's lullaby in Old French. Soon after, a man with a beard thick as a tar forest approached and held out a small pouch. "Sleeping bat powder," he said. "Guaranteed dream continuity." You politely declined, but couldn't help thinking he deserved a spot in the first chapter of every marketing textbook. As the sun finally dipped beyond the trees, fires were lit all across the fairground. The scent of burning wood mingled with melodic singing, and you noticed the embroidery on the performers' cloaks. Daisies, crescent moons, and a grinning fox. You caught the eye of a traveling portrait artist who was sketching a cow as if it had just graduated from university. And then you remembered. There are things that can't be recorded in books, nor analyzed with data. Things like the way the last light of day reflects on a musician's face, laughter mingled with the sound of wooden flutes, or that instant you almost believed in magic when a child jumped to their feet after a trick and shouted, "It really disappeared." You stayed until the last drum beat faded, until the flames dwindled, and the performers, backs aching, rolled up their stage cloths. The crowd dispersed, leaving behind an empty field and a silence like unwritten parchment. You sat beneath a tree and let out a long breath, a breath scented with honey, smoke, and something nameless, as if you had just stepped out of a dream you never knew you had entered. You thought you'd stop by just for a moment before heading home. But then the night wind slipped through your coat, and the distant church bell rang softly, like a whispered invitation. You stood up, your steps following the winding, cobbled path up the hill, to the old monastery and a legend that still refuses to sleep. The legend says that on every crescent moon night, a nun walks the monastery walls, holding a candle that never goes out. They say it's the spirit of Sister Beatrix, who once refused the proposal of a nobleman to keep her vow to God, only to be buried alive in the cellar when he discovered she was secretly helping fugitives. Historians still debate whether Beatrix was real, or just an idealized symbol of loyalty and feminine tragedy of the time. But here you are, standing before the heavy oak door, and the wind is still singing the song of stone and moss. You push the door open. Dampness and old ashes wrap around you instantly. In the main hall, candles as thin as finger bones flicker. From tall iron stands, their glow dancing on stained glass. One window depicts St. George slaying the dragon, but the dragon doesn't look frightening at all. It's yawning. You walk down a narrow corridor lined with tiny prayer rooms, each no larger than a bird's nest. On the walls, faded frescoes, an angel holding a towel, a man gazing dreamily at the moon. The light from your candle casts shadows that make the images seem to stir, and then you reach the final room. The monastery library. Don't imagine a medieval library as a dust-choked haven for rats. No, this one has a vaulted ceiling with intricate carvings, and oak benches polished smooth by centuries of hands. The books are chained to the shelves. Yes, literally chained. Books were as valuable then as private jets are now. No one trusted. You'd bring them back if borrowed. You sit beside an open manuscript. The handwriting is soft and flowing, the ink deep blue like sea waves. One page shows a star map, dotted with concentric circles and cryptic symbols, like a board game designed by the divine. Beneath it reads, "And when the sky holds no stars, follow the light within your heart." Someone had written this with a slightly trembling hand, as if whispering into your ear from 600 years ago. In the corner of the library sits a locked iron chest, the kind that could hold an entire lifetime's worth of secrets. Beside it, a small music box made of walnut, its brass crank catching the candlelight. You turn it, and a simple tune begins to play, repeating over and over like a story that never quite ends. You lean back against a column, close your eyes, and listen to the wind threading through the cracks in the vaulted stone. In that moment, everything blurs, as if you're no longer here, but drifting inside a story someone else wrote long ago. And you're just the temporary reader, invited in to sit for a while, hear a passage, then leave. The candlelight dims, and you know it's time to go. But as you step outside the monastery, you glance back one last time, and you see, or think you see, a small light slowly moving along the far wall, like a nun holding a candle. You're not sure, but you smile, and you walk back down the hill beneath a moon thin as a sliver of memory. You leave the monastery and follow a narrow path by the river, where the moonlight begins to hesitate and shimmer, like shattered silver mirrors. Now, the nighttime sounds of the 15th century hum like a distant choir, the hoot of an owl from the bell tower, the gentle gurgle of water flowing past an abandoned mill wheel. And somewhere, the trembling strings of a lute echo from a darkened wooden house. You walk on until you see a slightly ajar gate leading into a secluded courtyard. Inside, a few shadowy figures are gathered around a makeshift fire. An iron pan sits atop a few bricks, and the rising smoke carries hints of honey, cardamom, and burning wood. A group of strangers are brewing something, and an old woman with gapped teeth smiles at you as if you've been friends for years. You approach, glancing at the bubbling pot, unable not to wonder, is this an impromptu feast, or a ritual of some kind? And then you realize, tonight is the feast of Saint Radegund, A nearly forgotten celebration, all but swallowed by history, once beloved by rural folk. They'd bake millet cakes, drink mead made from wild honey, and gift each other necklaces braided from mulberry roots. Sit, the old woman says, handing you a wooden bowl filled with a dark brown warm liquid that smells like Christmas meeting. A wine cellar. You take a sip, sweet, spicy, with an aftertaste like gently scorched wood. It feels like drinking tea steeped in sunset. Historians still argue whether Radagun truly healed the sick using birch bark tea, or if that was just a rustic excuse for brewing homemade alcohol. But you are savoring every drop, in a moment where history seems to have sat down beside you, smiling and offering you a piece of hot cake. By the fire, a boy cranks out a cheerful melody on a hurdy-gurdy, while a woman in a red hood, the kind you only see now in Grimm's fairy tales, spins and dances in straw shoes. An old man tells a story about the time he fell asleep in the monastery wine cellar and woke up in a different monastery, 70 kilometers away. You chuckle, not fully understanding the words, but his voice has the rhythm of a clumsy lullaby. A child whispers and asks if you know how to call an owl by name, and all you can say is, "You've never tried." On the mossy brick wall, someone has drawn chalk symbols, a fish with legs, an upside-down candle, and a torn moon. You ask what they mean, and the old woman simply replies, "Things to remember." A gray cat silently leaps onto your lap and curls up, as if you've been its owner for years. It's a feeling only these ancient festivals can bring. A warmth without explanation, a closeness without need for reason. You lean back against the wall, wooden bowl still in hand, eyelids growing heavy with the sound of crackling fire. And, in that half-asleep, half-awake moment, you hear someone whisper near your ear, with a voice like wind through the trees, that tonight, the boundary between time is thinnest, that perhaps, with just one blink, you might open your eyes to another century. You don't reply. You simply nod, softly, and let the warmth of the fire, the sweetness of the drink, and the fading moonlight soak into your every breath. After all, you hadn't planned on going to bed early anyway. You don't remember how you left the festival courtyard. Maybe you followed the gray cat, or maybe you simply stood up and walked away without anyone noticing. But now, you're lost in a forest path, dawn approaching, and the early mist weaves spider silk traps between the tree branches. On the trail paved with damp leaves and tangled roots, you come upon a scene that feels almost mythical. A group of people building a smokehouse, deep in the woods. You squint. Simple wooden frames, thatched roofs made of reeds, and in the center a clay kiln emitting a strange white smoke. The scent, like someone roasting moss mixed with cinnamon, and something faintly like scorched pollen. A man in a russet wool cloak with curly hair and a gray beard turns to you as if he had been waiting. "Want to try?" he asks, holding out a bundle of herbs tied with twine. You hesitate, then nod. In the Middle Ages, fumigation wasn't just for purification. It was also a way to soothe the spirit, repel evil entities, and, if you were lucky, cure insomnia through belief. You sit on a three-legged stool and the man lights the herb bundle. You watch as the smoke curls through your sleeves like serpents made of breath. Warmth begins to seep in slowly, and you start to feel light. Light the way memories sometimes slip out of your head at 3 a.m. Historians still debate whether this fumigation therapy had any real effect, or if it was just a fragrant placebo of rosemary and star anise. But at this moment, you need no proof, because your body feels as if it's being gently disassembled, joint by joint, tendon by tendon, until you're weightless, dissolving into the morning mist. A young woman with braided hair approaches, carrying a fan made of phoenix feathers. She waves the smoke toward you in slow circles. "Don't speak," she whispers. "Let the smoke teach you how to disappear." And you obey, silent. like a mushroom freshly risen from a carpet of rotting leaves. The world around you begins to shift in color. The leaves take on the tones of a sun-scorched painting. The sky leans into hues of dusty pink and gray, and far off, the crows begin calling to one another, as if rehearsing for a grand performance. You don't know if this is a healing rite, a local custom, or simply a strange morning in a forest forgotten by history. But each curl of smoke seems to weave a different memory into your mind. Of shadowy wooden cabins, old women nodding by charcoal fires, and long lampless nights filled with whispers. A child comes and hands you a flat stone, engraved with a spiral symbol, and whispers, "If you place it under your pillow, you'll remember your true name in a dream." You take it and smile. Not because you believe it, but because, why not? You rise, bowing awkwardly, the kind of bow you've seen in old paintings of saints. The smoke still clings to your clothes, light as a sadness not yet born. You turn back to the path, now opening onto a mist-covered meadow, where the sun begins to peek out, a pale golden eye behind the trees, and you walk on, with a stone in your pocket, the scent of herbs in your hair, and the thought that, perhaps tonight, you really will dream your name, not the one in your passport, but the one someone once whispered into your ear. In another century. The mist had lifted, but the dream had not. You keep walking, your imaginary shoes sinking softly into the damp grass, and the early morning light feels as though it's being filtered through a linen veil suspended across the sky. Your footsteps merge with a strange sound coming from afar, the clinking of metal and the steady tapping, like the heartbeat of a time machine. You arrive at a low stone monastery nestled on the hillside, where monks in gray habits are engaged in something quite unusual. They are not praying nor transcribing scripture. Instead, they are melting beeswax in clay pots and pouring it into cylindrical wooden molds. Some are trimming excess wax with curved knives. Others are carefully dipping candle wicks into an opaque liquid that resembles oatmeal. An elderly bald monk, likely the abbot, is holding a gold-edged book tightly between his knees, flipping through pages of handwritten instructions inked in red. You quickly realize you're witnessing the making of sleep candles. Yes, in the 15th century, before alarm clocks existed, people used candles to measure sleeping hours. Specially made candles, marked with copper pins or slow-burning threads, would burn for 4, 6, or 8 hours, depending on their design. When the wax melted to a certain point, a pin would drop onto a tin plate with a soft clang, like a tiny bell, signaling it was time to wake, or to pray, if you were a monk. You watch a young helper boy dipping a wick by hand into the hot wax, his face contorting as if enduring a minor punishment. His hand reddens, but he makes no sound. In another corner, a young monk is carving letters into the side of a candle with a small blade, murmuring something under his breath. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a poem he doesn't dare commit to paper. A candle is placed into your hand. The wax is slightly soft, warm, and smells faintly of burnt honey. 4 hours, the monk says, for dreams that are short but clear. You almost laugh, as if dreams could be preset in duration, like episodes of a series. Historians still debate whether these candles were purely timekeeping devices or if they held spiritual significance, a kind of belief that a tiny flame could illuminate the winding paths of sleep, guiding one away from nightmares. You're led into a cool, stone-lined room where the scent of ash and wax lingers. A small straw bed awaits, and you find yourself lying down, the unlit candle still in hand. A monk hands you a tin plate and a flint lighter, smiling gently, the way your father once did when letting you ride a bike alone for the first time. You light the candle. The tiny blue-gold flame trembles, casting flickering reflections across the ceiling like a fish swimming through shallow water. You don't know when your eyes closed, nor are you sure when they opened again. But when you step out of the monastery, the candle is nothing but a broken stump. And somehow, you feel you've passed through a dream that was precisely measured, with procedure and ritual, as if someone had weighed each drop of your sleep with a silver spoon. You return to the dirt path, now bathed in full daylight. Behind you, the monastery dissolves into mist like a secret. Ahead, the world unfolds again, this time into a small market where people trade herbs for eggs, rumors for glances, and perhaps time for a sliver of burning wax. You pocket the broken candle stub, a proof you'll never know how to explain. And you keep walking, because the dream isn't over. And somewhere, perhaps, other small flames are waiting to be lit, just to guide you through the long night. The smell of raw onions and damp wool hits your nose even before you fully step into the low, wooden-roofed house, where light filters in only through a few narrow gaps in the walls. The air is thick, like soup left unstirred. At a coarse oak table, a family of 7 is gathered, not for dinner, but to sew shoes. That's right. No Netflix, no TikTok. After sunset, the lives of medieval commoners were filled with tasks so monotonous and drawn out, you might consider chewing on a piece of rope just for entertainment. You stand there for a while, watching the thin hands of a mother push a needle deep into worn leather. Each time the needle goes through, she pulls the thread tight with her teeth. The eldest daughter is embroidering a family symbol onto a shaving knife, while her younger brother polishes a brass belt buckle. A gray cat curls in a straw basket, blinking lazily as if long accustomed to a life slower than chimney smoke. A weary-looking father, probably a carpenter, you guess, is shaking sawdust from his cloak, then sighs in a way that says, "This winter is longer than Lent." He looks at you, not surprised, not confused, just nods, as if the appearance of a dream walker is only the third strangest thing he's seen this week. The oil lamp is made of animal fat, a smell not easily forgotten. Its glow doesn't reach the whole room, only casting faint halos. On the table where you notice old knife scars and hardened drips of wax frozen like solid time. You sit down. A little girl hands you a pair of hand-knitted socks patched all over as if to say, "Keep warm, stranger." You smile, softly. And remember, you once had socks like that, when you were 8, knit by your grandmother from leftover yarn. Turns out, 1,000 years apart isn't as far as one warm gesture. Someone knocks. The wooden door creaks open, and a man steps in carrying a wooden bucket, his face damp with night mist. Inside the bucket are turnips. He whispers a few muffled words to the mother, like wind chimes wrapped in cloth, then gestures in your direction. She looks at you, tilts her head and turns away. No questions. You figure this is your cue to politely not exist. Historians still debate how ordinary people in the Middle Ages truly experienced nighttime. With too little light and too much silence, was the night once stranger than even the deepest forest? You rise. Someone presses a small apple into your hand, perhaps a share of the labor, or a farewell that needs no words. You step out, the wooden door closing behind you like a sigh. Outside, the night has thickened into a syrupy fog. In the distance, an owl calls, as though the old world is making the bed for the next chapter of its story. And you, in your wool socks, with hands still warm from the hearth, keep walking. Every house, every flickering lamp, every whisper. Behind wooden walls is part of a world you cannot belong to, but can pass through, like a good night wish folded gently into the dark. You walk further down the dirt path, leaving behind the pink glow of the lime kiln. The air is colder now, quieter, as if the land itself is holding its breath after the fiery pulse of the flames. The moon is high, round and pale like an underbaked rye loaf, casting your shadow long and wavering over the damp grass. Then you hear it. A clattering sound, rhythmic, along with a soft tinkling like wind chimes. But it's not the wind. It's a handcart, rolling slowly along the road. On it sits a woman, her head wrapped tightly in a shawl, her eyes both watchful and serene, holding reins that dangle down, though no animal pulls ahead. As you draw near, you see the cart is loaded with bottles, bundles of herbs, wooden boxes, and dried onions hanging like charms. A wise woman, or a cunning woman, that's what they're called, is plying her trade. Under the moonlight, a small mirror pinned to her forehead glints faintly, casting a dim halo that makes you hesitate, even though you were just chatting with a fire the size of a small room. She nods at you, then pulls out a small pouch. "For good sleep," she says, pressing into your hand something strongly scented with dried lavender, a hint of pine resin and dried apple peel. You bring it to your nose, and a warm feeling rises in your throat like herbal wine. But before you can ask anything, she gestures eastward. "There's a birth in the next village tonight." You walk with her. Each step brings a quiet squeal from the wooden wheels. She tells you she used to be a medic in a monastery, until it burned down, supposedly because a priest left an oil lamp too close to a rat's nest. Historians still debate that detail, but the fact remains, she survived. The monastery did not. "Now I work the roads," she shrugs. "Dogs don't bark, cats follow." And sure enough, a small black cat, skinny as a twig, walks close beside her like a living shadow. She calls it tonic. You ask if she's a witch. She laughs. "Only when I get the dose wrong." It's a light joke, but somehow the wind stills for a beat when she says it. You stop at the edge of a field. In the distance, the thatched roof of a small house sways under a hanging lantern, waiting. She turns to you, presses a sprig of mint into your hand, and continues on. The cat tonic glances back, its eyes glinting like two moonstones. There's a strange clarity in that moment, a recognition that people like her were once the doctors, apothecaries, counselors, and sometimes the living Google of a village, as long as you knew how to ask. And even if you didn't, they'd still give you something fragrant to tuck under your pillow. You take a deep breath. The scent of herbs still lingers in your hand. The wind grows colder, and the field hums with insects like a choir being taught by a half-asleep frog. You return to the main path, your steps steadier. Not because you know more, just because it feels a little safer now, knowing that even in the dark, someone might be walking beside you, quietly, with a cat, a cart, and a pouch full of mint-scented magic. You turn into a narrow path paved with gravel, each stone jagged like the bones of a sleeping crocodile forgotten in the mud. The road leads into the district of craftsmen, where calloused hands and hunched backs are the only jewelry anyone wears. The first house you pass echoes with steady pounding, followed by a sharp, "Ow!" "Try, boy." Someone has clearly struck their hand instead of the leather. You peek through a half-open window. A man with tousled hair, drenched in sweat, is stretching a piece of hide across a wooden frame. Beside him lie unfinished shoe frames, unstitched, leather unstuffed soles. This is the workshop of a cordwainer, a maker of new shoes, not a cobbler who mends old ones. You recall the difference as if preparing for a midnight trivia challenge. You tap lightly on the doorframe. He looks up, squinting through the oil lamp's glare. "No orders taken at night," he says, his voice like a bellows exhaling. But when you explain you're just passing through, he motions you in with a jerk of his chin. The smell of tanned leather, dried sweat, and a trace of cinnamon from a leftover mug of ale create a scent that's unpleasant in a strangely interesting way. He tells you the best leather he's ever used came from a cow that lived near the graveyard. It sounds eerie, but the truth is more practical. The soil around graveyards is soft, which grows, faster grass which feeds better cows, which makes more supple hides. Historians still debate this peculiar chain of logic, But in the medieval world, the most reasonable explanations are often the strangest ones. On the wall hangs a tiny shoe, so small it could fit a mouse. "That's a luck shoe," he says. "Everyone needs a pair like that when they start out." Or at least to remember we all begin that small. After a while he resumes stitching, fingers dancing across beeswaxed thread like a tightrope performer. You ask if he's ever made shoes for nobles. He snorts. "I've made shoes for nobles who still trudge through mud like farmhands. In the end, everyone's feet stink the same." You bid him goodbye and step out, the scent of glue lingering in your coat. Outside, the moon has shifted westward. Your shadow now short, like the final period of a story. You pass silent storefronts, their doors secured with plain wooden bars, while mice clearly outnumber people in their nightly errands. On a rooftop, a tabby cat lies stretched like a tired king, its eyes lazily watching you. Perhaps it once belonged to a craftsman, or perhaps it's simply guarding a street no one else does. You say nothing. Your feet feel warm now, as though walking in shoes crafted from that graveyard leather. Or maybe it's just from the long walk. It's hard to tell, but what's clear is this. You're beginning to understand, piece by piece, a world where elegance is crafted by hand, with blade, with needle, and with the weary sighs of those who shape it. You keep walking, leaving behind the rhythmic thud of leatherwork, like the heartbeat of a neighborhood still pulsing, long after sleep has settled in. You pass beneath a trellis of dried vines, snaking over the wall like a hibernating dragon. And suddenly, ahead of you, a small square appears. In the center stands an old stone well, its surface still as a mute mirror. A lantern sways gently. From a leaning post, its trembling light reveals a group of figures huddled in hushed whispers by the well. You approach quietly. They wear dark cloaks with hoods pulled low, looking as if they're performing a secret ritual. Then one of them leans forward and drops a coin into the well, murmuring something like a prayer. Another, with trembling hands, places a small cloth pouch on the edge of the well, something inside jingling faintly. You ask, and they tell you this is the Well of Sins, a place where people come to confess the things they dare not say aloud, not to be forgiven, but to lighten the burden in their hearts. The pouches contain tokens: a lock of hair from a lover who married someone else, a keychain stolen from a master, or even a crust of bread not shared with the hungry. No one picks them up. No one checks. Historians still debate whether the Well of Sins was a widespread practice or just a fleeting custom in a few scattered towns. But one thing is certain. It leaves a strange feeling in your chest, as if sins don't need absolution, only acknowledgement. One woman in the group glances at you and nods slightly. Her eyes aren't sad, but look as though something inside has just been washed, clean but tired. You nod in return, saying nothing. Beneath your feet, a paving stone bears a faded symbol, an ear listening and a mouth sealed, the old sign for unspoken confession. As the group disperses, their footsteps seem to dissolve into the mist. You move closer to the well, not to confess, just to look. But the water doesn't reflect anything, only darkness, and the feeling of being understood without having to explain. You leave the square, your heart aching gently, like you've just remembered something you tried to forget. The next street is strangely silent. Each house seems to be holding its breath. On one wall, there's a hand-painted image of a person being pulled in opposite directions by two ropes. You're not sure if it's an illustration of inner torment or just a guide for setting a rat trap. At the end of the road, there's a wooden gate leading into the backyard of a large house. It's not locked. You push it open. It creaks like the throat of someone who's had a long cough. In the yard, moonlight spills onto a stone bench, blanketed in leaves. You sit. The stone is cold, but not unpleasant. In the distance, there's a rooster's crow, or someone imitating one. Either way, the night is shifting. You breathe deeply and feel your thoughts ease, not because of the well, not because of confession, but simply because there's a place to set things down, even if only for a moment. You rise, steadying yourself with one hand, and thank the bench with a small nod. In this era, everything has a soul. The night carries on. And you, the aimless wanderer, walk once more, step by step, down a nameless road etched with the traces of those who once lived, once breathed, and once loved, just like you. You keep walking, following a narrow alley guided by the silver moonlight stretched like silk thread across the rooftops. The air is cooler now, perhaps because you're nearing the outskirts of the city, where overgrown gardens squeeze between houses and crickets chirp like the soft giggles of someone trying not to be heard. A scent wafts by. Not flowers, but warm milk mixed with honey, lingering like a memory from childhood. You turn a corner and see a small wooden house, a faint, golden light flickering from a round window, like a cat's eye half open. A sign hangs out front. House of the Dream Scribe. No need to knock. The door opens on its own as you step closer. Inside is a quiet room filled with bookshelves, scrolls, and ink jars. A tall, thin man with a shiny bald head turns and greets you with a bow so deep it nearly brushes his stomach. "You've come to deposit a dream?" he asks, voice like wind through bamboo. You nod, though you're not quite sure you have a dream to leave behind. He hands you a scroll and a goose feather already dipped in ink. Right. It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be true. You sit on a chair with a loose armrest and begin to write. Not a full story, just fragments of memory. The way sunlight shone through a glass of lemonade in summer, the time you pretended to sleep so your mother would hug you a little longer, or that strange ache in your stomach watching someone you liked laugh with someone else. You can't stop. With each line, you feel lighter. When the scroll is full, you hand it to the dream scribe. He nods silently, rolls it up, and tucks it into a numbered drawer. You glance inside. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of other scrolls, all dreams, all kept safe. Historians still debate whether such dream archives ever truly existed, you think, or if they're just metaphors for places where souls find shelter. But clearly, you've just left something real behind. Before you leave, the dream scribe presses a small piece of paper into your hand. "Read it when you need to remember you're not alone," he whispers. You step out, clutching the slip like a charm. The sky has now deepened to indigo, and a lone star twinkles like a small fish's eye in a dark pond. You feel as if you've just emerged from a place outside of time, where sorrow is not chased away, only invited to sit, sip a cup of tea, and quietly leave when it's ready. You continue down a path strewn with dried petals, perhaps rose, or some flower that no longer exists. The night breeze brushes your hand, as if trying to take your emotional temperature through the warmth of your skin. A gray cat perches on a windowsill watching you. It doesn't meow, doesn't blink, just watches, as though it knows exactly what you've just experienced. And truth be told, you feel like it really does understand. You no longer remember what it was you came to find in this city, but you're certain now. You've found things you didn't know you needed. And now, with a slip of paper in your pocket and a heart lighter than before, you walk on. Not fast, not slow. Just enough to hear your footsteps blending with the city's quiet whisper. A dream still being written.